All right, I've got a question. Have any of you guys ever heard, by show of hands, of the show Survivor? Okay, some of you have heard of it. Has anyone kind of know the idea of the show, maybe, also? No? Okay, great.
I've seen a clip on, like when my dad's watching football.
Yeah,
There's,
like a clip, like a
it's
little
like a
commercial trailer. So the show Survivor works where they get a whole bunch of people, random people, together on like a deserted island.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, and they have to like, huh?
It's fun.
Yeah, and they have to like survive on this island, and they do all these different challenges, and they make groups with each other, and they have like fights with other groups, and they vote people off the island. If you ever heard the phrase of someone being voted off the island, that's where that comes from. Yes, Judah?
Sounds like something Mr. Beast would do.
Yes, except it's been around for like 20 years, so... Yeah, the show's been around forever, it feels like. Probably longer than that. Oh, there you go. Good.
I'm 10 years old.
So one of the aspects of the show Survivor is that, right, they're on this random island, and when you're on a random island, there are some things that happen, right? Like there's storms maybe that come around. There's animals that you have to look out for, right? Like snakes and tarantulas and tigers and jaguars. Okay. Sharks. I'm a snake. There's a bunch of things that would be a problem for these people, scary for these people living on this island. And so one of the things that they do to combat that scariness is they build a shelter. Of course. Big brain move. You build a shelter. So one of the, I think one of the like maybe best shelters that's ever been on the show, I have a picture of it here. This is like, I mean, this is pretty intense, right? This is like a double-decker, yeah, like,
That looks like something.
yeah.
Did they make it?
Yeah, so, right, like, yeah, so like, it looks like something from a movie, but it's just from a show, and these are like normal people, you know.
It's from a movie, but it's from a show.
It's from a show. It looks like it's from a movie, but it's from TV. So they make this shelter to help them combat some of those things that would harm them while they're staying on the island, right? So if there's a storm coming, well, then you've got, obviously this one's not finished yet, but you've got a lower deck that maybe is kind of covered up and is, you know, safer. Or if there's, I don't know, a jaguar, you can climb up to the top of it, kind of a thing. I know they can climb. I don't think there are jaguars on the islands, but maybe like a snake or something, you can be higher up off the ground, right? And that protects you from those things. So the shelter is a really key part of survival, right? If we're thinking of, then they get voted off the island. But if we're thinking about the show, right? A big piece of our survival is where are we staying? What's our shelter look like? And the same thing kind of works for us in our lives, right? Our shelters help us to not only survive, but thrive, right? It said that some of the teams that have better shelters actually perform better because they can sleep better, right? They feel more comfortable, and so they do better at the challenges and the competitions and go farther in the show. So it really is like having a good shelter is super duper important because you need to protect yourself from the elements. And there's an element of shelter that comes into play here as we get into Ruth chapter 2. So, if you've got your student Bibles with you, Ruth chapter 2 is on page 300. Page 300. If you don't have one, we can get you one, don't worry. Page 300. Ruth, and we're actually going to start with Ruth chapter 1, verse 22, and then we're going to go on from there. So, Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied... I'll give you a second. Everyone there? Ruth. Okay. It's the 8th book of the Bible, so it's in the front-ish part.
I got
Wouldn't that be the middle?
No.
I'm in the middle.
The middle of 66 is not 8.
Yes, it is.
All right, I'll start reading. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Elimelech. So I said Boaz. So Ruth and Naomi returned to Bethlehem at the time of the what? Barley harvest. Now, if there's a barley harvest, this is an interesting piece of context. What does that mean is happening in Bethlehem right now?
Lots of people are picking the barley.
Yes, lots of people are picking the barley, and that means what's ended?
The barley harvest. Planting.
No, that's not what I'm looking for.
Well, yes, but
Not the fast. You're on it.
The harvest.
oh, the famine.
There we go. That's it. You were there. It was right. It was on the tip of your tongue. The famine. The famine has ended.
I got that.
You got it. Good job. The famine. Yes, the famine has ended because there's food growing. It's like the bread has returned to the bread box. You know, if Bethlehem is the house of bread, there's bread back in it. So it's definitely the famine is definitely over. And then we get this other little piece of context. This is kind of like foreshadowing a little bit, right? Because we're just thrown into chapter 2, verse 1. Naomi has a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So we've got this guy named Boaz who's, I guess, around in Bethlehem, but we don't really know much about him other than he's a man of standing and he's from the clan of Elimelech. So we know no other context about him right now except for that. But we're going to jump into verses 2 and 3. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. So there's a few interesting things here, right? First, we see that Ruth kind of takes over. The story thus far has been mostly about Naomi, right? It's mostly been about Naomi and her family's journey to Moab, everybody dying, Naomi being like, "Oh, it's terrible to be me, I'm miserable and bitter," and then traveling back. Finally, in this part, it's almost like this line is Ruth kind of taking over the story a little bit. We've been introduced to Ruth, and now she's sitting there going, "Let me go and glean behind anyone I have favor with." And in Israel, God has established a system. So we're getting into some Old Testament law. Woo! Yeah! Woo! Bible nerds! Huh?
Let's read Leviticus.
We can read Leviticus later. I would love to, but we're not. I'm just going to give you the context. That's not Leviticus. It's fine. God has established some laws for the nation of Israel. One of those laws has to do with how farmers and landowners utilize their farms. And he establishes this thing called gleaning, right? So we see the word glean. Where was it? Here. Glean. Gleaning. Does anyone know what gleaning is? Yes, Emma.
That means that after the harvesters get all the wheat, that there might be some left, so then people pick up that little part.
Yes.
And then they just go behind all the people get the majority of it, but then they get the little pieces.
Yeah. So it's like, maybe this is a good example. It's basically people go out and farm and pick all the food, and then anything that's left over, other people can come and pick up and use. So it was to help widows, orphans, and foreigners, people who didn't have as many means in the nation of God, to be able to be provided for. Right? So this is, and Ruth fits into two of these categories, right? Because she's a foreigner and she's a widow, so she definitely needs to be provided for in some capacity. And so gleaning is written for her, basically. It's kind of like this. Has anyone gone apple picking? Yeah. And when you go apple picking, right, it's fall in Michigan. We all go apple picking.
I don't.
Okay, well, you will. Sorry to promise that. You might. But when you go apple picking, what do you see on the ground all over the place? Yeah, apples, not tomatoes. Oh my. No, apples. There's apples sitting everywhere. And so the problem is when the apples fall on the ground and then they're sitting there for a long time, they get all they get all smushy and gross, just like tomatoes, but not tomatoes. But imagine if if people are going through and picking apples, there's someone else behind them who's picking up the apples that fall on the ground. So instead of them just sitting there and getting gross, you can wash them off. It's fine. Then there are some more apples that can be eaten instead of just wasted and turned into mushy floor apples, right? Yes.
It's kind of like a soup kitchen.
Yes, it's kind of like a divine soup kitchen. That's a great way of putting it. This is a way that God provides for people who need food.
Oh, I'm raising my hand.
Yes.
It's like cleaning after cleaning.
Yes. So Ruth somehow knows about this gleaning and asks if she can join into it. And Ruth gives Naomi gives Ruth her blessing. There we go. Naomi gives Ruth her blessing. And verse 3 gets really interesting because it sounds like an accident just happened, right? So she went out and she went into some field and began to glean behind the harvesters. And as it turns out, it's in the field of Boaz. Right? It's like, just so happens that she winds up gleaning in the field that belongs to Boaz. Like it's an accident. Now, the reason that the author wrote it this way is to kind of get your little alarm going off in the back of your head. Because it's written as if this is an accident, but so far nothing in the story has been an accident. Right? It's all been God working at stuff. And so if you're hearing all of a sudden, and then it just so happens that she's in the right field that she's supposed to be in, it's like, that's not an accident. That's intentional. God brought Ruth into the field of Boaz. He directed her there intentionally. And then we get into verse 4. Yes. So just then, Boaz arrives from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you." "The Lord bless you," they answered. Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, "Who does that young woman belong to?" The overseer replied, "She's the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, 'Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters.' And she came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter." So what we see here is there are two kind of dynamics about Boaz that we're starting to see a little bit. The first one is that he's in the time of the judges, right? And remember we talked about this a few weeks ago. In the period of the judges, what was the culture like? In those days, everyone did as they saw fit. Yes, there we go. Thank you. We got there. In those days, everyone did as they saw fit. People just kind of did whatever they wanted. People weren't following God. And yet we've got this guy Boaz who's hanging out in his field and he greets his harvesters in the morning. And what does he say to greet his harvesters?
He says, "The Lord be with you."
Yeah, the Lord be with you. The Lord bless you. They say the Lord bless you back. But Boaz has established in his field an element of when we're here, we're following God. When we're here, it's a little bit different than the rest of the world. Have you ever thought about that? Sometimes you look out at the world and go "Oh man, things are crazy," right? You can't control the world, but you can control the circle that you're in. You can control yourself and your circle. And so there's an element of, yeah, I did, but it was good, so I took it. So thanks, Bella. You can control your circle. And so there's something about being intentional with the people that you surround yourself with, the people that you're around and the community that you're a part of, that you can go, I want this to be a community that even if the world is doing whatever they want to do, we're sitting here going, hey, the Lord bless you. We're going to focus on God today. Then It does remind you of a song. Then he says, who does that young woman belong to? He does not know who Ruth is, but she catches his attention. It's also here that we learn that Ruth is still considered young, right? I mean, she's been married for 10 years. Her husband dies. She goes on this little, week-long journey back to Bethlehem. So we're like, oh man, how old is she? Well, Boaz gives us some insight that, she's still at least younger than he is, right? She's young. And then they respond, well, she's the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. And she said, please let me glean from among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came to the field, remained here from morning till now, except to take a rest in the shelter. Like, she's been here working all day, and she asked us to, and so, yeah, we let her. Now, Boaz knew Naomi, right? Because if he comes from the clan of Elimelech, he would know someone from his clan's wife, right? He's one of those people who's been in contact with her story as they left, Naomi's family left Bethlehem a while ago. So he kind of is probably somewhat aware of her story, and that means when he gets told, oh, that's the Moabite woman that came back with her, well, he probably knows some of her story as well. Bless you. He probably knows some of her story, that she was married to Malon or Helion, and they're dead now, so she's a widow, and she needs some help. And, he's processing probably some of this stuff behind the scenes. And this is something interesting about Boaz, right? Because initially we learned Boaz is of the clan of Elimelech, right? We're like, hey, he's a close relative. And remember what Naomi said a few weeks ago to Orpah and Ruth? She said, you guys can't come with me. Why? I have no sons for you. I have no one else for you to marry to continue our family line. Go back. I got no one for you. But then all of a sudden, now we're introduced to this guy Boaz, who's of the clan of Elimelech. Which means that he's actually, potentially, someone who could step in and fill that role. So we realize he's a close relative. That's pretty important. But it doesn't help us a whole lot if he's a close relative and a major jerk, right? Like if he's a close relative and he's like, oh, that's Ruth. Like, no, that's Ruth. I'm not doing. Bye, right? Like that doesn't help the situation at all. And so what we realize here is that not only is he a close relative, but he is also very kind because he cares about her. He's asking questions about her and is caring about her in the fields. And I want to take a second and stop here. Fellas, guys, listen up, right? Here's a question for the young men in the room. What kind of man do you want to be? You don't have to answer that. I just want you to think about it. What kind of man do you want to be? I would encourage you someday, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe in the near future, to be a Boaz. Look out for the needs of others. Become selfless with the things that you have, right? He's allowing people to come into his field and just take stuff without charging them for it. Right? He's being kind. He's being generous. He's allowing himself to step into this role to protect and provide for Ruth and Naomi. This is important. And we're jumping into verse 8 now. And we're going to see him really take this to the next level. Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the women. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whenever you're thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled. Right? This is him really taking that next step. Because he's not just saying, oh yeah, you can come and just like hang out in the fields and glean a little bit. He's like, oh no, I've told the people here, like they can't touch you. You're going to be safe here. I've told the people that you're going to be following them, taking some gleanings. And not just that, hey, if it gets a little hot out, if you're getting a little tired from gleaning, go take a rest. Get a drink of water. Make yourself at home. Hang out here.
Wow.
Right? This is a really big hint that Boaz knew Ruth's story because he insists on her to not only glean from the field and work for him, and watch the workers in the field, but he reassured her that he's protecting and providing for her through this field. No men would touch her. She can always find water. Boaz is not only a close relative, but also kind. Now, verse 10. At this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She asked him, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Boaz replied, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and your mother and your homeland and came to live with a people that you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, for the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord," she said. "You have put me at ease by speaking kindly to your servant, though I do not have the standing of one of your servants." Right? Like, she's like, "I'm not even a servant of you. Like, I'm a rando. Like, I just walked in," right? But when you protect and provide for someone else, it's a big deal. Right? Ruth knows this, and that's why she bows. She's showing Boaz respect. She's saying, "Hey, I respect you, even though I'm a stranger." And she even asks him, like, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you notice me? I'm just a foreigner." We find out that our guesses about Boaz are completely true, right? He's like, "Yeah, I've heard your story," right? The people have been talking for years about this story of what's going on with Naomi in Moab. I know, I was on that journey with you in a sense. I know what's happened. I've been told about what you've done," right? And then he also says in here, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done." Right? Ruth became a blessing to a hurting mother-in-law. She bound herself at Naomi's side when she clung to her. She traveled with her to a foreign land, right? She left her parents. She left her hometown. She left their gods. She sowed good seeds of kindness and empathy and hope to her hurting mother-in-law, and in return, she's reaping the benefit of a godly reward. Right? We talked about this a little bit last week. The things that you sow, you will reap. The seeds that you plant will turn into the things that you plant. And so that's not only physically with barley or whatever, yes, because they're growing barley, but also with the attitude that you have with your life, the kindnesses that you give to other people, right? Make your life be a life of sowing good seeds, and you'll be able to reap good seeds in return. She's reaping the benefit of a godly reward. She's reaping the kindness back from Boaz, the empathy back from Boaz, the hope back from Boaz, and not because she just did nice things, but because she took refuge under the wings of God. What does that look like for us, to take refuge under the wings of God, right? Ruth just walked through immense difficulty. She lost her husband. She left her homeland. She's working in the field of a stranger for food. Her life has not been a walk in the park up to this point. But Boaz tells us and tells her that she has taken refuge under the wings of God. Right? If we think about the illustration at the beginning, the hut that was made in Survivor, the things that you take refuge in protect you from the chaos around you. And when I was thinking about what does this mean for us to take refuge under the wings of God, it brought me to Psalm chapter 91. And so we're going to play a video of me reading Psalm chapter 91, and then we'll head over to small groups. Psalm 91. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that strikes in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. If you say, "The Lord is my refuge," and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Oh, thank you. Let's pray. Lord, we just thank you for your wings of protection. And Lord, I just pray as we think about how we want to find provision and protection, similarly to how Ruth was able to find it with Boaz, that we would find that with you, Lord. That you would extend your wings of protection over us. That we would feel safety from the chaos around us in your embrace, under your arms, Lord. That you would hold us closely and tightly and just be that consistent protector and provider for us, Lord. Help us to look to you in those ways as we navigate and figure out how to do life. Help us to be in step with you and protected by you, because that's the safest place that we can be. So we just pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.